One of the things that I hear most often from creators is that they're truly scared to negotiate, mostly because they really don't know how. So many creators that are in this space now did not get started in sales or in business. And so now they're kind of coming into it and having to negotiate these deals for themselves. And they don't have experience with this. So it's so understandable if you're having this confusion or hesitation with negotiation, but I'm going to share some things with you today that I really hope will help you feel more confident as you go into negotiations because truthfully, this is one of the most important skills I think that you can have as a creator so that you're not leaving money on the table. And we're just not doing that in 2025. I'm Kristen Busquet. I've been a full-time creator for over 3 years, and I've brought in over $350,000 from sponsored posts and content creation collaborations with brands so far. Social Scoop is the podcast where we teach you, the entrepreneurial creator, to turn your online influence and creativity into a profitable, self-sustaining business. So, the first thing that I want to talk about is starting with a collaborative tone. So, when we think about negotiating, I think one of the hardest things we do is we don't realize that this is a 50-50 partnership. You and the brand have 50-50, like completely split down the middle rights in this partnership essentially. So, yes, they're the one hiring you, but they're also choosing you, right? So you also have some power here. I think it's very common for people to think like the brands are holding all of the power. So when we get a contract as a creator, we're like, oh, well, the brand sent it over. Like, they must want this to be the contract. Like, I can't make any changes. They made the contract. Or, oh, they said this is what they can pay. Like, well, okay, I'll just take that, because I don't have the power here. That's simply not the truth. Creators have just as much power as the brands in these situations. And so that's really important for you to think about. So, when we're thinking about starting off the tone of the partnership, I think it is very important to remember that this is a collaboration, right? It's called a partnership for so many reasons. What you need to remember is that brands are hiring you because you are going to deliver a service for them and you are as invested in making this partnership successful as they are, right? Like, they want to know you're not just in it for like a quick buck. They want to know that you are getting hired to create something that you are just as excited to have these results as the brand is for hiring you. So, one of the things that I really love is when you are in negotiations with this brand, I think it's important the way you word things to actually say, hey, I'm just as invested in this as you. Like, I want this success for this partnership just as much as you do. And selfishly, that's mostly because, like, we know if it goes well, we'll probably get rehired. But also, like, a brand is potentially spending thousands of dollars with us. Of course, we want them to get their money's worth. Like, that would suck if we were ever in a situation where we spent thousands of dollars and didn't get our money back. So, when you're wording your emails back and forth to a brand, or even when you're on a call with a brand, maybe instead of saying, here's my rates, you can say like, I'm so excited to really like get this ROI that we're looking for, or hey, I know that our campaign goals are this. These are the deliverables that I know will help us get there. Like, using the wording in a very strategic way to let the brand know I'm not just here for a quick buck. Like, I'm genuinely interested in like helping this be as successful as possible. And I actually think that the way you bring this up can lead into these other negotiation steps that we're going to talk about, but you have the power to essentially share with the brand that like you have ideas on how to make it strategic and how to make it successful as well, right? Like, it's not just up to them to think about it. You are a strategic partner. So it's really important that if you do have ideas or you do have opinions, that you're really open to sharing those with the brand, because then they'll trust you that you're going to help make this as successful as possible. So while it's not necessarily a negotiation tactic, I do think it's important to mention because I want you to know that you have the right to say things like this. So, for example, even, further down the partnership, funnel, when you are at a point where you're talking about what this content is going to look like, if you have a script from a brand and you're reading it and going, oh God, my audience is going to like cringe at this, is horrible. Don't just record it, right? Tell the brand, hey, I really appreciate you sharing this with me. However, I don't think it's going to resonate with my audience. What if we did something like this and you switched it around a little bit? Yes, it may feel like the brand is going to be a little frustrated with that or maybe offended that you didn't like their script, but that's really not the case in most scenarios. They're going to be like, "Oh, wow, like thanks for telling us," or else we would have just been wasting our money on a video that your audience is going to hate. So don't be afraid to speak up. And that really brings us so nicely into this negotiation conversation. This may be a pretty obvious piece of negotiation advice, but if it's not, or maybe it's a refresher, you have to consider the number that you want to land on before you give your rates out. So, for example, my typical rate for an Instagram reel is around $2,000. Usually, I end up getting paid somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000, but I always start at 2,000 because I'm essentially anchoring to set the base rate. And let me explain that a little bit further. So I'm kind of starting with maybe a higher than expected rate as my base to kind of anchor that conversation in my favor. So if I were to go back to the brand and they say, hey, what's your rate? And I say, my rate is $2,000. I know I'm either going to get paid $2,000 or they're going to come back and negotiate. But if they come back and negotiate, now I'm okay with getting paid 1,500. I know that I've now helped myself stay in that range versus if I knew I was okay getting paid 1,500 and I said 1,500 and the brand still wants to negotiate with me, now we have to still negotiate lower than that 1,500. So by setting the expectation of where my rate is with the brand, I'm also allowing myself a little bit of that room for negotiation. So you're kind of raising that rate to leave the room. So, for example, another example, if you're a creator who typically would like to get paid around $500 in your pocket, what I would be doing is maybe saying 750, maybe 800. The best thing is when the brand agrees and says, "Great, I'll give you the 800." And you're like, "Awesome." You have this range of maybe 500 to 800 that you're okay getting paid, 500 being like your lowest. You're like, "Great, I'm getting paid on the higher end of my rate range." But if they have to negotiate and maybe they come back and say, "We can't do 800, can we do 600?" And you say, no, can't do 600. That's like $200 lower than my rate. Can we meet at 700? And you might be able to kind of meet in the middle there. So that happens very often. And you have to, I think, go into partnership conversations knowing that almost every time they're going to negotiate. Like there are actually very very few times where I've had brands that have not negotiated, which I think is great because they're being like a little bit more respectful of the rates that I set out, right? Like you don't go to the doctor's office and say, "But how about this much for this appointment?" So I appreciate that because I have rates set in place, they're not negotiating, but I think at this point in the industry it is pretty common that they're going to negotiation. They're going to negotiate. And I don't think they mean any harm by it, of course, but also think about it this way. I remember I had someone from an agency say this to me once when talking about brand partnerships, is that it's basically like Tetris. So they're kind of like getting all these rates from different creators that they want to hire and they have a budget. Now they have to try and fit all those rates into one budget. So you can imagine how difficult that can be, which is why I think so many brands and agencies do negotiate a lot because they have to fit it into this box that with a bunch of pieces that like don't fit perfectly, right? So that's okay, but you just have to go into it knowing I'm not going to start by offering the brand the number that I want to get paid. You have to anchor the conversation in your favor by sharing a rate that is higher than what you would like to end up. Outside of that, one of the things that I think is a pretty common misconception for creators about negotiating is that number of dollars, like your rate, is not the only thing that you can negotiate. Literally everything is up for negotiation. Usage rights, deliverables, timeline, all of that is negotiable. And the cool thing is it gives us much more flexibility on what we can actually offer a brand in a certain rate range. So, for example, if I had a brand that said I have a $1,000 budget and I were a creator who typically charges $1,000 for a reel, I can obviously say, yeah, I can only give you one reel for that. And maybe they're asking for two reels and stories. I can only really give them one reel for that $1,000 because that's my rate. But what I can do is negotiate those deliverables, right? So instead of saying, actually, if you want two reels and two stories, my rate's going to be $3,000. And they're like, but we just told you we only have 1,000. You can negotiate the amount of deliverables. So you could say, okay, well, if you only can spend $1,000, my rate for one reel is usually $1,000. I could do one reel and a story set. That's your negotiation, right? So they could say, okay, yeah, that works for us. Or they could say, no, we really need all of those deliverables. And in that case, you say, great, well, then my rate is $3,000, right? So the brand the brand has to have some flexibility too, right? Like you shouldn't just have to say, okay, fine, I'll do all of it for $1,000. Because what's going to happen when you do that is you're going to end up resenting this partnership so hard. And you're going to be absolutely miserable throughout every part of the process. And you're going to regret it. And it's going to suck. And it's going to weigh on you so much because you did it for like next to nothing compared to what your usual rate is. So, keep that in mind, like, right, take that into consideration as you are deciding what you're gonna take on for a partnership. But moral of the story is you can negotiate other things like deliverables or usage rights or things like that. One of the things that I always instruct all of my students to do is actually present three different options. And I actually learned this back in my past life where I was working at a salon. I was an esthetician, but I also like covered the front desk. And one of my bosses, she said to me, I want you to sell products too. And so like what I would do is like after the appointment, I would also like, I'd come to the front desk and check them out, but I'd also say, "Hey, like, your hairstylist used this shampoo. Do you want to take this with you? Do you want to buy it?" And what I found was like I was getting people like constantly turning me down. It was always like, "No, no, 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 no." And I was having such a hard time selling products. So what she told me was to bring three products up. Instead of just presenting one and making it a yes or no, I can present three products and make it options, kind of like more of an option based decision. So instead of them just saying, no, I don't want any of these, they might go, well, I can't buy all three, but I could just get the shampoo, or maybe I'll get the shampoo and conditioner, but I'll leave the styling product or whatever. So having options gives people less of a chance of saying no. It's less black and white, less yes and no. And it's more, okay, there are options here. I don't have to take all of it, but I can still decide that maybe I want to take less, or maybe I want to take one, or maybe I want to take all three. You never know. So, I actually use that example because it's exactly what I do when I'm presenting brand partnerships. So, actually, in Social Suite, which is my private creator community, we have in our templates and resources bank this proposal template. And in the proposal, there is a section where you'll present three different offers to the brand. So, for example, in that example that we just talked about, if a brand wanted two reels and two stories from me, and my rate was $3,000, but they were asking it to me for $1,000, what I would do is I would create three different packages. I would create one that is just a little bit below their budget. I would create one that's like around their budget, maybe a tiny, tiny bit higher. And then I would create one that's exponentially higher, but is a massive, massive deal for them. Like they would be dumb not to take it. So with the lowest package, what I usually do in there is I'll give them like one reel, but a little bit of a discount. So, for example, if my reel rate was $1,000, package one might be one reel for $800. So it's under their budget, but they're only getting one of the deliverables that they asked for. Then package two might be like one reel and two stories instead of $2,000. Maybe I'm going to charge like $1,250 for that. So I'm thinking in my head, all right, it's a little bit above their budget, but like they're getting most of the deliverables. So like we're still like just kind of negotiating here. And then my third package might be two reels and two stories like they asked for, but maybe I'll also include like 30 days of exclusivity and 30 days of paid usage rights. Normally, maybe I charge $3,500 for that. I'll do it for $3,000. So now they're getting all of the deliverables that they asked for, plus a little bit more. Yes, they're spending more money, but that is a fat deal, right? Like compared to what I would normally charge. And very often, what I'll do is I'll literally put regular price, X amount of dollars. So, like in that one, if it were $3,500 or $4,000 that it usually was, I would put regular price, $4,000. Your price today is $3,000 to show them, like, I'm giving you a really good deal. So, if you want all of this, you're getting it discounted, right? So then they can look at option 1, 2, and 3 and go, okay, well, we could get this for under our budget, but it's like no content. This is like not, option 1 is like pretty boring when I'm looking at these other two. Option 2 is nice because it's right at their budget, but again, they're still like, oh, it's just like not all the content we wanted. And then option 3 is so juicy that they're like, should we just like push our budget a little bit further? Because like this is such a good deal. Like we really wanted this person, and then they can kind of make their decision from there based on financially what they're able to do. But instead of just saying, sorry, no, my rates are 3,000, like how close to 3,000 can you get? And they're like, not really close. You're giving them options so that they can kind of decide what makes the most sense for them and potentially be like swayed to look into a higher package because you are giving them such a great deal. So I always love doing this, or even, like when I'm kind of trying to negotiate longer term partnerships, if a brand says to me, hey, we want to hire you for one reel, I'm like, what's your reel rate? And I'm like, it's $2,000. I might say, but I'll give you two reels for 3,500, or I'll give you three reels for 1,500 each for 4,500. So like I will beef those packages up so that I can get more long-term partnerships. Or if I say we'll do one reel a month for 6 months, I might do it for like $1,000 because I'm like, great, I'm making $6,000 now instead of just 2,000, right? Like, yes, I have to do more work, but also now I have consistent work for 6 months. So I very often will do things like that. I'm willing to take a lower rate if I know that the work is going to be more consistent. It's just less that I have to go out searching for every single month, right? So I love this. This is like one of my favorite things to do when negotiating is presenting options like that, and negotiating deliverables, right? Because like deliverables are just as negotiable as the numbers are, as the rates are. One other really great thing that you can do to kind of, I guess, leverage during your negotiation process is to use case studies or testimonials. So if a brand is giving you a lot of pushback on the rate that you'd like to get paid, you can come back to them and say, I have proof that I am worth this much money. A brand paid me $1,000 for a reel, and here are the numbers in my like affiliate code backend. I can look and say I've generated $3,000 worth of sales. Like they got that $1,000 back times three, and all they had to do was pay $1,000 for it. So if a brand is saying, no, we only want to give you 500, it's like, but I have proof right here that I will get you your money back, right? And obviously every partnership is different. Just because one has really great results like that, it's still technically a risk on the end of the brand, right? Because like we don't know if it's going to end up the same way, but you've done it once, maybe you've done it twice or 100 times. So what's to say it's not going to happen again, right? So when you have that evidence, and we do in Soulcial Suite also have a template for a case study, you can actually literally send this PDF to the brand and say, here's why my rates are what they are. I personally don't feel like in every situation you really need to justify your rates, but I think it's a good thing to have in your back pocket if you are in a situation where a brand is giving you a lot of pushback and you're like, I really want this, but they're offering me just like rates that are crazy low. I think this is a really, really nice option to be like, look, here's my results. Like, here's what I have done. Here's my performance. Like, look, I've done it once, I can do it again. So we love case studies for that reason. The fifth tactic is actually the scariest, but it's like one of my favorites. This is right up there with offering the package options, is being willing to walk away. Like, simply saying that rate is too low. We're not gonna get where I want to get or anywhere that's reasonable for me. So I'm gonna walk away. I cannot tell you how many times there has been a situation where a brand has offered me something. I've negotiated with them a little bit and they've said, oh, sorry, like we really can't. And then I say, okay, well, thank you so much for thinking of me. If anything changes, please let me know. And then maybe a couple weeks later, or the next week, or a month later, they come crawling back into the inbox and say, okay, so we found some room in the budget. We really want to do this thing. Like, if a brand wants you bad enough, they will find the money somewhere. They'll move things around. Maybe they'll take a little bit of ad marketing dollars and kind of like pull them into, hiring for influencer campaigns. Maybe they're going to, only take 4 influencers instead of 5 so that they can hire you. Whatever it might be. There's so many different ways that they can kind of move this money around. But if they want you, they will come back. And also, like, I think it's such good practice for you to say no to things that are above, like, under you, right? Like, you are above an offer that is offering you $100 for a post. I don't care how many followers you have. I think $100 is like offensive. $50 is so offensive. Free is even more offensive. But like, there is a threshold that I think we all know that like this work is not worth it for me at this price. It's got to be above X amount of dollars for it to be worth your time. And whatever that number looks like for you might be different for other people, who knows. For me, I'm just like anything less than like $1,000 or maybe $1,500, I'm just like like, cuz I know myself and I just know that like I end up very resentful in those partnerships. Like, I end up being like, damn it. I wish I didn't take this on, because those partnerships always end up being the ones that are way more work and they like suck the life out of you and everything goes wrong when you're trying to film it. I don't know why it happens that way, but it always happens that way. And I find that I end up like feeling like I'm just shooting myself in the foot when I'm taking partnerships that I know in my gut are less money than I deserve. And I think I have flexed that muscle so many times of just like saying no and walking away that at this point I'm very comfortable with it. But I will tell you, when I first was doing it, I was like, is this insane that I'm saying no to this partnership? Like, I actually remember when I was first getting started, I got Ulta had reached out to me and I was like, holy shit, like this is crazy. This is such a big brand. At the time I was doing a lot of like fashion, beauty, all kinds of stuff. So this was like my holy grail, right? They were asking me for like, it was maybe like a 6-month partnership. It was a lot of content. And as I was running the numbers, I was like, this is like $10,000 worth of content. But that would be insane if I asked for $10,000, right? Like, I'm like, what the, like, that is crazy. But I was just like, this is a lot of content. This is 6 months worth of me working for this brand. It's not that crazy for me to ask for that much money. And so I sent them $10,000 quote. I literally outlined everything on like why the rate was what it was. And they got back to me and basically like laughed in my face. And it was like they were offering me like, I don't know, $2,000 for all this content, or $1,000. It was offensive, horribly offensive. And I just remember going, there was, I could have sent a $20,000 quote and they would have laughed the same way. Like, cuz they were really never trying to pay me fairly. Like, and so imagine if I had taken on 6 months worth of work for $1,000 just because it was Ulta. Like, I would have hated myself. I would have been so pissed as I was creating all of this content, cuz like it's also now taking away from time that I could be working with other brands or even just reaching out to other brands or whatever. Like it's taking away. Now I can't work with Sephora because I'm working with Ulta, whatever. It's taking away from the amount of money that and time and energy that I would have in the future if I took that partnership for such a low rate. And so there are so many times where you're going to be in a situation where a brand will offer you something very low like that, but you are thinking in your head, but is it worth it because it's this brand? And I can tell you, I really don't think it ever is. Like, I think there's very rarely a situation where it is really worth it if it is offensively low like that. You know, you can't offer me $1,000 for what I'm asking for $10,000 for. That is a very big difference. Maybe if Ulta came back to me and said like $6,000, I would have been like, okay. Like, yes, it's still very low in comparison to what I'm asking for, but also like this is long term, like it's a brand I love. I've been always wanting to work with them. I might have waited, but when I am getting a pushback that is so offensively low, I truly know that that brand is not valuing me like I should be valued, and so I know that it's not worth my time. So being willing to walk away, I think, is one of the most powerful things that you can do. And if I said to Ulta, yeah, no, sorry, $1,000 isn't going to work. Have a great day. Let me know if anything changes. And then maybe they did change something, right? They know my door is always open. Like they know they can always call back or email back, whatever, if anything changes. But like me walking away could have gone the way it did, of course, but it also could have been them coming back and being like, all right, look, we want you that bad that we're gonna like, you know, give you all this extra money. I think with that partnership, I don't think they would have personally. Obviously, they didn't want me bad enough to find 9,000 more dollars in the budget, understandably. But I was confident in my decision, right? And this has happened 5 million times since then. Some of the brands come back, some of them don't, but I always like remember, no, I was worth way more than they were asking. Like I know that I am worth more than that. And that again, I think comes with flexing that muscle of just like continuously saying no to things that do not serve you or are beneath you. Because honestly, a lot of the offers we get are exactly that, which is sad, but it's the truth. So that was 5 of our negotiation tactics. I actually wanted to give you a bonus one because I think this is like such an important lesson in life, not just in negotiation. It is the strategic silence. One of the things that us people pleasers very often do is we feel the need to over explain things. You know, so I might be like, yeah, my rate is $2,000, but like, okay, here's why. Like, let me give you my life story of like why so that I can like make myself feel better and like justify it. At the end of the day, sometimes in those situations where you are over explaining, you're actually doing more harm than you are good, which is actually kind of my feelings about media kits. Sometimes I feel like media kits just have way too much information on them. And like a brand may see something that they didn't really care about before, but now they see it on the media kit and they're going, wait, actually, do we want to hire this person? Like, and obviously we don't want to be in that situation. Okay, right? So sometimes you being short and sweet is going to be more beneficial than you giving over explaining, you giving way too much more of an explanation than is actually necessary. So in a situation where you're going to send your rates, instead of giving this whole explanation of like, but let me explain to you how I got to these rates, like just give them the rates. This is my rate for these deliverables, period. List rates. Let me know what your thoughts are. Best, Kristen. Like it can be that simple. It should be that simple. You do not have to justify why your rates are what they are. When we think about case studies and things like that I've shared, I think that comes in handy after you've already started the negotiation process and maybe you're getting a lot of pushback. You can say, well, okay, now maybe I have to like pull out something out of my back pocket to justify it a little bit to explain to you, but if even after that the brand is just like, then walk away. Like that silence, I think, where you are not over explaining things speaks so much louder than you over explaining them. You saying these are my rates, period, shows I'm confident in my rates. These are my rates. This is what I get paid. What about it? Right? Like we need to go into negotiations with that confidence. Do not feel like you have to over explain everything. You don't. I think it actually, again, will make you shoot yourself in the foot more than anything else. So remember that negotiation, while very scary, is something that the more you flex this muscle, the more you practice, the more you put in the reps, the easier it's going to be, the more actually fun I think it is. It's like this like scary fun thing. It gets your adrenaline going a little bit. Um but there's also this aspect of like empowerment, right? Like yeah, your rates are what they are. Like, you're making that happen. You are negotiating with a brand and getting paid what you're negotiating because you had the confidence to ask for it, to negotiate it. So, after you have a really good negotiation with a brand, give yourself a pat on the back. Take a look at that situation and ask yourself, like, what happened here? What did I say that was so awesome? Because like that's all such a great learning experience. And also when a brand trusts in you, I think it also gives you more trust in yourself, with which only helps you in future negotiation situations. So you're gonna do great. I have faith in you. I'm always here if you need anything, and I will see you guys next week.